What's up guys, this is Nishi from MST.TV here. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys about the Chaos Impact sneak peek. So I really love sneak peeks because they bring a lot of people out to locals that don't normally come out, right? So that's a lot more people to meet, play with, practice with, trade with. Also, it's really cool to kind of like take a first look at cards from the new set, see what decks people want to build and like try out. However, buying and selling cards at sneak peek can be a little bit tricky. When we look at pre-sale prices on a site like TCG Player or Troll and Toad, those prices are often hugely inflated, right? Because people don't widely have access to the cards yet. Everything just gets listed really high right off the bat, as vendors hope that they can get someone to pay ridiculously high prices for cards. These prices almost always drop by like at least half within the first couple weeks of coming out. We therefore want to avoid mistakes like that when we're buying or selling cards at sneak peek. Remember that since only sneak peek packs are available, there's a limited supply of cards on the market, so the card prices are going to be much higher than what they'll eventually settle at. It is therefore very important to look ahead and think of where card prices will settle after the set has been officially released, so that you aren't overpaying for cards at really high prices. Why buy something for $60 on sneak peek weekend when you can very easily just wait like 2 weeks and buy the exact same card for $20? At the same time, if you like pulled a secret rare, there's a very good chance that if you sell the card to someone who wants to overpay, who really wants access to that card right away, you'll be able to buy it back later at a much cheaper price. So that being said, what we're going to do is go over some of the main chase cards from this set and try to identify key price points for you all so that you can be as prepared as possible going into your sneak peeks this weekend. Let's get started. Alright guys, so first up we have Marincess Blue Tang. So this is a really important piece for the Marincess archetype. It is a foolish burial for a Marincess monster on summon, and then when you link it off you get to excavate the top 3 cards from your deck, add a Marincess card to your hand. This card is definitely something necessary for the deck, especially something that really hasn't done anything in the TCG thus far. My big concern with this card's price is that I don't know how viable Marincess will be moving forward. On the ban list, I was expecting a lot of things to get hit, as I'm sure you guys know, so I thought that Marincess could be a top deck in the new format. However, with so many decks still alive, I don't know how viable Marincess are necessarily going to be. Despite this, I do think that Blue Tang will be one of the most hyped up cards in this set. I'm expecting its price at sneak peek to be around $60, maybe as high as like $70, which is what we're currently seeing as the pre-sale price on TCG Player. However, at that price, I would definitely be selling the card if you happen to pull it. Now this card's price depends entirely on how well Marincess does as a deck. If it does very well and tops events, expect it to stay around $40 to $45, maybe $50 if the deck really dominates. If it doesn't, however, do expect it to drop to around $30, maybe even as low as like $20 to $25, which is pretty close to the price point that we saw Coral Anemone sitting at for the past few months. Okay, so next up we're looking at the Unchained cards. So unfortunately for you guys who wanted to build the deck, the Unchained archetype actually has 4 cards that are secret rare, which kind of sucks because I was personally looking just to build the deck because of how cool the card art is on all of them, but it's whatever. Anyways, the first one we have here is Unchained Soul of Disaster. This is the level 8 that lets you start linking off with your opponent's cards. It's level 8, right? So it has to be brought out with another card from the archetype unless you want to like tribute summon it. This is a card in the deck that's definitely a 3 of because it allows you to get the deck going. So in terms of price, this also depends on how well the Unchained archetype does in the TCG. In the OCG, Unchained haven't really done anything notable, and I think that that's a trend that's going to continue here in the TCG. I have seen some people try to incorporate a few different strategies into the deck. I've seen Evil Eye, I've seen like those Dark Spirits from the Legendary Duelist Immortal Destiny set, and then also True Draco. True Draco is pretty notable because we do have Dragonic Diagram at 3 here, whereas in the OCG, I believe it's still at 1, so it's very possible that True Draco Unchained will be a thing here. However, with all of the old decks still alive in the new format, just like Marincess, right? I don't think there's much room for the Unchained to really do anything. The deck is a little bit too easy to disrupt, and it can't do enough on any given turn, I feel like. That being said though, I think that a lot of people are going to try to hype up the Unchained a lot, claiming that the deck must be good because the archetype has 4 secret rares. I think we're actually going to see pre-sales and sneak peek prices of this card at between $30 to $40. Eventually, I do see the card dropping to $15 to $20 price range that like a lot of average secret rares really hit. If the deck does actually do well, then I could see it staying up at around $30 as a 3 of in the deck, but realistically, I'm thinking that about $15 is where it's going to settle, which is about as much as I would be willing to pay for this card even at sneak peek. So next we have Unchained Soul of Rage. This is probably the most important link monster for the Unchained deck, as it's the one that allows you to conduct a link summon with your opponent's monster during their turn, providing disruption mid-combo. This one is definitely the link monster that you're going to want to run at 3 in the Unchained deck, as it's also the easiest one to make. Again, our reasoning behind the prices is going to be very similar as when we talked about Unchained Soul of Disaster. Rage is something that is going to be played at 3, but the deck isn't necessarily the most viable. I would expect its sneak peek price to be pretty average as well, again between $20 to $25, maybe $30, and then taking considerably all the way down to like that $10 to $15 mark. As much as I would like for the Unchained to be good, I just really don't think that the deck does enough in today's meta, so I think that the prices are eventually going to settle relatively low, all things considered. So the next Unchained we have is the Unchained Soul of Anguish. This one is the link 3, like the next step up in the ladder from Rage. This one is probably the one that you're going to link Rage and your opponent's monster into. With this one, you can again link with your opponent's monster, but not during their turn, which I think is a good thing because it'd be pretty broken if you could link twice during their turn with their monsters. I've been doing a bit of looking around at the Unchained decks that people have built, and I do believe that Anguish is one that you only need 2 copies of, therefore I would expect its price to be a fair bit lower than that of Rage. So whereas with Rage we're expecting to see prices of around $25, I'm expecting Anguish to only be about $20, and then in terms of where the price will drop to after the price falls, I'd say around the $10 mark as well. This card's price may drop even lower if the deck really tanks that hard, but I'd say that around like $8 to $10 is a pretty decent price to pay for this card. And the last Unchained card we have here is Abominations Prison. This card in any other archetype would be really broken. However, I think it's just a good card here because the deck isn't that good. This card you can activate to search for any Unchained card, or if it's set and then destroyed, you can summon an Unchained monster from your deck. The thing about this card is that you can use each of its effects once per turn. So even if you open with 2 copies, it's not necessarily a brick. Anyways, this card is a definite 3 of in the Unchained deck. This is probably something that's going to be very similar in price to Disaster and Rage, because all of them are like 3 ofs, probably looking at a pre-order and sneak peek price of between $30 to $40 a card. Again, however, since the deck probably isn't going to be too strong, I personally wouldn't be paying more than around $15 for this card. So with all the Unchained cards, obviously I could be wrong. It definitely could be the case that the Unchained archetype is really strong here and is going to do well in the TCG. Honestly, we really won't know until we see how the deck actually performs at a regional or a YCS event. However, personally, I'm making like my own educated guess from doing my own research and reading up on the archetype, and I think the deck is going to flop and be fairly cheap. Even though I do think there's potential for the deck, it isn't something that I would want to risk, which is why I'm setting my buy prices quite low for this archetype. Okay, so here let's talk about what's probably the worst secret rare in the set, Masquerade Pyro Phoenix. Every set has one of these that's secret rare that you don't ever want to pull, like Cap Shell or Super Team Buddy Force Unite. I think that in this set, that card is Pyro Phoenix. So when you reincarnate summon this card, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. That's pretty cute. And you can also summon a link monster from your opponent's graveyard to their field and then burn them for damage equal to that monster's attack points. These effects aren't necessarily bad, like reincarnate summoning and blowing your opponent's field can be good, but if you manage to like link up this far, you probably aren't super concerned about blowing everything up, and the burn effect is really only useful in time or to close out really specific games. You're actually negging if you make this card and give them their monster back, so I don't really see it. The problem I have with this card really is that it's a link 4. It requires you to consolidate so many resources just to make it, and it can still be hit by Impermanence or Effect Veiler. Honestly, this card's just really underwhelming. I've done some looking around at OCG Salamangreat deck lists, since the deck is still doing okay over there, and Pyro Phoenix just isn't seeing any play there either, so I don't think that anything is going to be different here. In terms of price, I think that just as a secret rare, people are going to try to move this for like $20 just because there is going to be such a limited quantity at the sneak peek. However, don't be fooled by this. I personally wouldn't be paying more than like maybe $5 in trade for it. 5 cash even feels kind of bad. If you do pull it though, I would definitely try to sell it for whatever value you can, because the price is going to tank. Maybe if the card does see play here, for some reason it'll go as high as like $10, but ultimately this is the card that I would just try to steer away from as much as possible. Alright, now let's look at the cover card, which is Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid. Unfortunately, I don't really think that this card is even close to as good as Firewall Dragon is. So it's the first legal Link 5 monster, which is kind of cool, and it can set up multiple negates in the same turn, even the same chain. However, in order to get those multiple negates, you have to have a lot of different types of Cyberse monsters in your graveyard, which is kind of tricky to do. In most cases, you're going to be getting maybe 2 realistically, which is only 2 negates. And the thing is, even if you do make this card, I feel like most of the time you're better off going into a different Link 4 monster, right? Like Borreload, or Borrelsword, or Saryuja, or Appaloosa, and then using your other resources elsewhere. So while this card is neat, I do think that this card is just another cover card that's a secret rare because it was used like in the anime. In terms of price, at sneak peek, we're actually probably going to see this card between $15 to $20 because of that anime factor. However, I do think that the card will go the way of most of those anime featured cover cards. I think it'll probably settle between $5 to $10. It'll have a little bit more value because of its collectability. However, in terms of me picking up the card, I personally wouldn't be willing to pay more than around $5 for it. And the last secret rare that we have from the set is Starliege Safer. This one's really interesting. It lets you search for a dragon by ditching dragons with the same level from your hand or field. You can actually send this card to search for a level 4 dragon like Collapse Serpent or Wyverbuster. Also, when it's sent to the graveyard, you get to add a level 8 light or dark dragon from your graveyard to your hand, which means you can add something like a Chaos Dragon Levianeer or a Blue Eyes alternative white dragon. So this card was actually played in multiples in the OCG in Dragon Link decks. However, the problem is that Agripane is now banned both in the OCG and TCG, and since then we haven't really seen Dragon Link do well in either format. That being said, I don't think that Seyfert is really going to be viable in any decks here in the TCG without Agripane or Gumblar Dragon. Dragon Link just isn't very strong at the moment. It's still really vulnerable to something like Nibiru. That being said, I don't think that's going to stop the card from being hyped up at the beginning at least. I think that when the set drops, it's going to be like a $30 card. It's still a potentially really decent card, right? However, I think that ultimately it's going to fall pretty far in terms of price. In my mind, I'm comparing this card to something like Omni Dragon Brotar or Gizmek Orochi. If it does see play in those niche strategies where it can be good, then it'll go up to like that $20 to $25 price range. But if not, we'll see it down at around $10. Personally, because I think Dragon Link is kind of a dead deck, I'm inclined to say that it'll be down towards the lower end of that spectrum. Personally, I wouldn't be willing to pay more than around $10, maybe $15 if I thought it was going to be okay and start to see play. Okay, so now we're going to touch on a couple of ultra rares. Even though a lot of ultra rares are pretty cheap, there are a couple in this set that do have the potential to be worth a fair bit. First up is Striker Dragon, which is the Rocket Link one that was just imported from the OCG. Striker Dragon is a pretty significant boost to Rocket decks, but with Agripane banned, I don't think that the Dragon Link strategy is really going to be a thing in the TCG anymore. So I don't know if this card is really going to even matter moving forward. I actually think that because of how easy it is to get the rest of the Rocket cards from the Structure deck though, Striker Dragon is actually going to be pretty expensive at Sneak, maybe around like $15 to $20. There's going to be a lot of people who want to try and play with the deck as a whole. If we actually see the deck do well top some events, then I could see it maintaining that $15 to $20 price point. I don't really see it going much higher than that since it is just an ultra rare. However, if the deck continues to not see results, then I definitely see the card falling to only around like $5 or so. And the last card I want to talk about is IP Masquerade. This is a generic Link 2 monster with arrows pointing bottom left and bottom right. This card lets you Link summon during your opponent's turn, and the monster you make with it actually can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. I think that this card is probably the most useful Link 2 monster with these arrows moving forward, outclassing something like Psyframe Lambda. I believe that its price moving forward definitely depends on how much play this card sees. Tombox was telling me about how using this card to make Mech Knight Crusadia Avermax is ridiculously broken because it makes Avermax untargetable and indestructible. We are currently looking at a price of somewhere between $15 to $20 on release, and then realistically settling at around the $8 to $10 mark. If the card sees a lot of play, then I could actually see it getting as high as $25, approaching the price of something like Borreload Savage Dragon as a relatively generic extra deck monster. However, if the card doesn't see play, it could very well fall down to around $5. Overall though, I think that this is definitely a card that I would be looking to pick up at your sneak peek if you have a chance to, at around the $10 mark. Okay, so guys, one last note here is that if you have either Gladiator Beast or Dream Mirror cards just sitting around at home, I think that Chaos Impact Sneak Peek is going to be a great time for you to pull them out, bring them to the sneak, and try to trade them away. Those cards can be fairly hard to move, right? Like, no one really wants to pay or trade for common Gladiator Beast Proving Ground or like the Dream Mirror cards because they're typically so cheap. However, bringing these cards to sneak can be good because people may be willing to pay or trade for certain cards after pulling other cards from the archetype. For example, if someone pulls a few Dream Mirror cards, they might be more inclined to try to build the deck since they already have some of the pieces, and then they'll be willing to trade for the cards that you brought. So there's always a great chance for you to move them. Or, you know, if you have a friend that wants to build them, you can always just hook them up, so there's that too. Either way, if you have them sitting around gathering dust, I would just stick them in a deck box, bring them to locals, and see what happens. Alright guys, that is it for this video. Don't get me wrong, there are a ton of other really good cards in this set. Draco Masters of the Tenyi, there's the Gladiator Beast support, the new Rocket Seas, and then there's Bounty. All really solid cards that will at the very least be very cool additions to some decks. The only ones that I really wanted to talk about here though are some of the pricier ones, right? As far as the rest go, you can probably not need to worry about them too much. If they're ultra rares, you can probably pick them up for around $5. That's pretty safe. Then even if you're overpaying by like a couple dollars, who really cares? If they're supers, rares, or commons, you're actually probably a lot better off waiting until the set drops. Then you can probably just pick them up basically for free from a friend who hopefully is like opening boxes at your locals or something. Anyways guys, I wish you all the best of luck at the Chaos Impact Sneak Peek this weekend. Hopefully you guys all pull like 5 secrets in your set of packs. I'll actually be going to 3 separate sneak peeks this weekend, so I'm pretty excited. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and comment down below. Let me know what you guys are most excited about picking up at your sneak peeks this weekend. And of course, if you're subscribed to MST.TV, it is statistically proven that you have a higher chance of pulling better at your sneak peek, so make sure that you do that too. And yeah, until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.